In the age of technology and information overload, our food production model remains shrouded in mystery and controversy. To examine the volatile and incomprehensible scale of food manufacturing, we must first fix our gaze to the past. The food industry is the most influential industry on the planet, from the intimate choices we make about what we feed our families and ourselves, to driving forces that affect societal indicators of well-being, such as the economy and policies. The modern industrial food complex has a spectrum of implications influenced by events in the eras of colonialism, industrialism, and post-war capitalism. My passion for human civil rights and animal welfare has intersected with my activism focused in the food industry through nonprofit organizations, and has caused me to seek out lectures and rhetorics by prominent figures in the food production, animal rights issues, environmentalism, and anthropology. First, we will discuss how colonialism led to the conception of mass production, which allowed for the official factory model of the industrial era, followed by the post-war capitalism shift in consumer demand and convenience foods, which led a shift from local providers to corporate providers. And finally, we will address the issues within the food system today that have endured through these periods of change. To begin, in the 15th century, colonialism created monopolistic mercantilism, which outsourced foreign resources and initiated the plantation system, expediting cash crops, according to Ibrahim Afia, a professor of archaeology. Mercantilism is an economic theory that describes the disruption of static wealth by obtaining exported material goods and limiting imported goods. The plantation model facilitated this with the tobacco, sugar, and rubber cotton cash crops. Cash crops are crops that are harvested for bulk market demand rather than personal use or consumption. This was followed by industrialization in the mid-18th and 20th centuries. A shift from human capital to energy resources and machinery introduced the official factory model. This also marked significant human productivity that would go on to see the environmental impacts we see today. The factory model was refined from the plantation system by utilizing machinery and steam energy to improve fuel efficiency. Quality of life and life expectancy also improved with population density growing in factory towns, and the demand for improved plumbing and sanitation was met. Significant industries included lumber, metals, and fossil fuels. This era began the scarcity and pollution issues that we are dealing with today. This was followed by post-war capitalism, which saw a shift from local goods to corporate goods. And additional processing and chemical exposure was needed to ensure the quality of these goods for the demand. According to a documentary by Chris Taylor, packaged, preserved, and fortified food was used to feed and strengthen soldiers overseas. And eventually there was an overstock when the war ended, and it was marketed to civilians due to population growth and larger household sizes, the baby boom. And packaged and prepared foods were marketed as a convenience versus the time it takes to prepare a meal from scratch. This leads me to a few of the major concerns shrouding the current food production model. Beginning with environmental apartheid. This is strategically targeted ecological abuse, exploitation, or misuse targeted against racially and politically segregated communities. An example of this is extractivism, which is removal of precious resources from native land for export, and is heavily criticized for its role in climate change, food scarcity, decreased biodiversity, deforestation, and warfare. Another example is toxic colonialism, coined by Jim Puckett during the Greenpeace movement. It describes toxic waste being strategically dumped in poverty-stricken regions by wealthier entities. For example, North Carolina has the second largest concentration of pig farms in the US. And they use what culinary chef and journalist Barry Estabrook describes as manure lagoons and manure cannons. And they do exactly what they sound like they would do. They collect and disperse excrement. They were originally used to spray on fields and are now sprayed on communities. And they are, quote, also in an area that's predominantly poor, African American, in other words, people who don't really have a political voice. And there's been research done showing that pig farms are intentionally placed in these areas. The second issue is consolidation and monopolization. This has led to corporate buyouts of small businesses. According to the documentary film Food Inc., producer Robert Kenner mentions that the top 4 companies currently dominating 85% of meat production are Cargill, Tyson, JSB and National Beef, which previously only controlled about 25% of the market in 1970. Smaller farmers were bought out and expedited into mass production models. This caused hazardous working conditions for farmers, inhumane environments for animals, and land overuse. In conclusion, the initial impact of colonialism was the foundation for mass production models. This led to the factory model in the industrial era, and then finally post-war capitalism, which saw a huge shift in consumer demand for convenience-marketed foods. Finally, the contemporary issues within the food system and remnants of past eras are still present today. The modern industrial food complex is a multifaceted system impacted by events in eras of colonialism, industrialism, and post-war capitalism. The historical variables that have led to our current food production are marked by the duality of some of the most remarkably iconic and deeply sorrowful events in human history and continue to shape and influence our society as such. Let me do the cards.
Yes.
And the people.